I'm wondering if it's really true that there are people out there who do not understand that if you don't pay your debts, people stop doing things for you. Seems like a pretty obvious thing to me, but I wanted to talk about the subject of payment of government debt today on the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host, I'm Kurt. Today is Sunday, the 11th of April of 2021. And I'm happy to have everybody here who's on Rumble, on the podcast, on YouTube, or wherever you happen to be joining me today. Again, today's subject will be payment of government debt. And I wanted to really ask the question that whether or not there were people out there that are under some confused idea that government doesn't have to, quote, repay its debt. Look, you've got people out there, okay? And those people do things where they work for the government. You've got people who work directly for the government to begin with, right? And those people get a paycheck every week, every month, every 2 weeks, whatever it is. Now, I'm wondering where people think that money comes from. Where does that money come from? Well, it's operating budget from the government, but where does that operating budget come from? Well, it comes from debts incurred by the government, money that the government says that it will repay, that it collects money from taxpayers and otherwise to pay. That's where it comes from. Regardless what level of government it is. Obviously, different levels have different ways that they can do things. The federal government can print more money if they feel like they need it to pay things. It's a bad idea, but they can do it. Every level of government can tax more if they feel like they need more money in order to make it possible for them to pay the various folks who are working for them. At every level, they do that. That's one of the things that they do. But the point is, each and every level has to pay those employees, or those employees don't get money. They don't survive. And their option is, when they realize that the government is not going to pay them, to leave. They have no choice, to go and work somewhere where they will get paid, or where they'll get the necessary things to make it possible for them to continue to survive and support their families. So there's this idea that I keep hearing that government doesn't have to pay their debts. Well, what do you think will happen to just those government workers? What do you think will happen if they don't pay their debts? Because that's part of the people they have to pay their debt to, is those government workers work for money and they have to be able to pay that. And that's part of the debt that they incur in the process of being a government entity. All right, so what about non-government infrastructure workers? So people who fix highways and stuff. Who pays those guys? Well, their companies pay them. Who pays their companies? Who makes sure that their companies have money? Well, sometimes it's private entities, but for the most part, when you're talking about doing things like building bridges or highways or patching roads or whatever, that's government, and sometimes at the very highest levels who are doing that. They're paying those companies. That's who's doing that. So again, here's some debt that you can say they don't have to pay, but figure out for me how they don't have to pay it. I'd love to hear, because if I own my own business, I certainly have to do the same thing. And the way that I have to do it is to charge people, or find some way to get money coming into my company such that I can pay the people who are working for me. Just like government, it's the same thing. If you honestly don't believe such things are paid for by government, my question to you is, who does pay for them? Who pays for them? It's obvious that those people are getting paid. Government employees, infrastructure workers. And again, you've got all of these programs. You've got programs that do things like pay daycares, as I was saying yesterday, whether it's by giving them things, right, like the USDA food program, or directly giving them money like the voucher programs that you'll find that various of these entities are getting. Where's that money going to come from? If government doesn't pay it, who will? Who will? What, do they keep borrowing? If you lived your life borrowing, if you have lived your life borrowing, you've learned a rude awakening fact. It's pretty simple, right? If you've lived your life borrowing, you have learned that at some point people stop giving you money. They start to go, why am I giving you money knowing that you're never going to pay it back? And that's literally what happens. And if you, as it were, rob Peter to pay Paul, right? If you do that thing, if you borrow money from one person to pay money to another person, sooner or later you're going to run out of people to borrow money from. It's that simple. That's how that's going to work. You're going to run out of people to borrow money from. Government has it even harder in a sense and easier in another, particularly on a federal level, because the federal government, as I've said before, how do they get their money? They can print money. Bad idea most of the time, unless they're printing money against some product. They can tax their people. You can only tax people who can afford to be taxed, and that's not true for most people who are low wage earners. You can borrow money from others. Okay? These are really the three ways that you can get money. And there may be some others that you can think of if you work at it for a little bit. But for the most part, this is where most government money comes from. And we're already in a position on a federal level where we're not satisfying even the interest, not even doing what's referred to as servicing the debt, paying the interest on the debt that we owe. We're certainly not paying the principal on that. And we're talking about doing these gigantic infrastructure deals where we are, adding trillions to what we owe. Look, we already owe trillions, tens of trillions at the very least, maybe hundreds, maybe 100 trillion. If you look at, I forget the term, but there's a particular type of debt that they don't even write on the books as such, right? And the term again is escaping me, but I've used the term before, and I'm sure you've heard it. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, right? Who hasn't heard about this? There's debt that they actually put on the books. Yes, there's this. Yes, there's that, and then there's other debt that they don't even put on the books, that they don't even account in that which is owed, right? And it's a huge number at this point. That number, heck, the stuff that they do put on the books is a huge number. The stuff that's not on the books is even bigger. And the point is, at some point, this stuff's gonna have to be paid back if we're not doing it now. And if you look at our GDP, okay, let's just take a couple of numbers and give you an idea. And these are not real numbers. I'm just giving you some ideas, something to work with. Let's say you have a gross domestic product from your country, for your country, of let's say $3 trillion. $3 trillion. Now let's say you're intending on spending this year $4 trillion. Oh, well, you only have to make up $1 trillion. Wrong. You don't spend the entire gross domestic product of your country paying for the various debts incurred by government. Some small percentage comparatively, and if you make it a big percentage, even 50%, if you started out with, what did we say, $3 trillion, you have $1.5 trillion that you can actually use for government programs. $1.5 trillion, people, not the $3 trillion. So if you have $4 trillion in debt and $1.5 trillion that you can spend, that you can extract and exact from those people who are parts of the GDP, and I know there are other ways that you can get money, but my point is, you still have to make up. So you had $4 trillion, so $1.5 trillion, so what is it, $2.5 trillion? You still have to make up $1 trillion more than double what you would exact from people in GDP taxation of GDP. Okay? Now you've got other ways. You can do things like corporate taxes. You can do things like gasoline taxes and other things that are maybe not accounted in standard taxation. That's true. But the point is, that all has to be repaid. And what we have been doing is, quote, running a deficit. We've been spending money that we didn't have to buy things and then acting like everything was just fine when we did so. No, it's not. It is not just fine. Okay? This is a problem and we need to fix it. If the government, I'm going to say this again, if the government doesn't pay what is owed, who does? And if you're saying nobody has to pay it, I'm curious how you come to that conclusion, because I sure can't. I sure can't. All right. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I'm actually going to try and get in a little under what I've been doing in past. This has been the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host. I'm Kurt. Today is Sunday, April 11th of 2021. That means tomorrow will be Monday, the 12th of April of 2021. Thanks again for everybody who's come on Rumble and the podcast on YouTube. Thank you for joining me, or anywhere else for that matter. Our subject today has been payment of government debt. Tomorrow we're going to talk about a subject that's near and dear to my heart, outsider. I've been an outsider my entire life, so I'm pretty much an expert when it comes to talking about that. So that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow. Today is a nice day, and hopefully I'm going to get a chance to get my son outside and get him a chance to plod around in the park and then maybe get some food and so forth. So today being Sunday is the first day of the week for all of us who are Christian. The first day of the work week for most of us will be tomorrow. Yet again, thank you for everyone who's working on the weekend. Know that there are people out there who appreciate you for being there, even if we don't necessarily always do a great job of showing it when we're out talking to you. Hope you're having a good day today, and hopefully we will get a chance to see you on tomorrow's Daily Summation. The speaker on this edition of the Daily Summation is Kurt Schubert. This video is recorded on Sunday, April 11th of 2021. The Daily Summation is created for Kurt's Religion and Politics. Thanks for watching this edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I hope you found it entertaining or instructional, or maybe both. If you want to see more from me, you can go to blogs.kpschubert.com. That's blogs.kpschubert.com. I am on Twitter, Parler, and Minds.com. My handle on each of those is @kpschubert. That's @kpschubert. I have a Rumble and a YouTube channel. They are the Kurt's Religion and Politics channels on Rumble and YouTube. I have a Facebook page. The Facebook page is Kurt's Religion and Politics as well. I am on Patreon. If you want to support me, that's one of the better places you can do that. And you will find me at Kurt's Religion and Politics on Patreon. I have a podcast. The podcast is podcasts with an S, .kpschubert.com. That's podcasts.kpschubert.com. I think you should be able to find me with relative ease on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify as well. The best way I find to do that is to look for Kurt's Religion and Politics. You can try to use the Daily Summation. I find that it doesn't work as well as a general rule, but you can always try that. I'm glad to have you aboard today, and hopefully we will see you again tomorrow.